Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel once again. Of course, welcome to the Voice of Freedom. This is where we discuss the truth and the truth shall set us free. Yes, let me give some little bit of recaps of what is happening in East Africa. Currently, we understand after the loss of a democratic icon defender, that is Rally Amolo Odinga. Of course, now we expect now 2 weeks down there. Of course, his name will always still be remembered. And then, of course, we all understand what's happening in Tanzania. Of course, with the current president, where the opposition's leaders of Tanzania has been put into prison and been charged with treason. And of course, we see the current president of Tanzania recently has just been sworn in as the next president of Tanzania for the second term. This doesn't make sense. Of course, people are saying over 700 people have been killed, but of course, these numbers cannot be yet verified. The internet has been shut down completely in Tanzania. Now, we also need to flash back also during the time of Ruto, where there was a lot of the Gen Zs that rose up and were crying for Ruto to either step down, to move. A lot of people have died in Kenya. That forced William Ruto to make a change within his government system to bring new people, a fresh mind due to the demand of the Gen Z. Now, the question is, what is happening in East Africa? Now, there's a philosophy that I need to introduce here that you understand that the East Africa, or generally the Africa, is being run under a new philosophy or a new political philosophy, which is known as a communist democracy. Now, this communist democracy is not yet being endorsed by any of the European states or European nations. It is something, a practice that morally African leaders, they are adopting them just to cover up themselves from not being a dictator, but also not being a true leader of a democracy, but they're in between. Of course, look at what happened in Cameroon. Of course, no one expected that Paul Biya would come back as the next, of course, president of Cameroon. Look at what happened in Cote d'Ivoire. So all of them, they're using the same thing, the communist democracy. It's a system that still new in the era of this time of the Africans, who really seeing that there's a lot of confusion between the left and the right. You understand, the Europe people believe in purely in democracy, where they have the liberal democracy and also the conservative democracy. But then you go into the left, where you find the communist state like Russia, and then you have China, and then you have the rest, you understand. So the question is, where do Africans belong? So Africa, they are being trapped into to balance themselves in between. Now, in East Africa is the opposite. The mother and the father of the communist democracy is in Uganda, and the person's name is Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Now, the way you see him manage the system within Uganda is teaching the rest of the other head of states. For example, look at how Ruto is learning. You get the point. Look at how now recently the current president of Tanzania is learning from. Of course, we understand, of course, Paul Kagame is a product of Uganda, and it is his product, so you expect him to do better. So when people talk about that, but of course, each of them has the different means of way how to deliver their policies and how to run the states. So the question is, what should we do? Now, should we embrace the communist democracy that has been introduced as a new philosophy within our country, or should we reject them and rise up and say, you know what, we can't go with this? For us, we need the principles of democracy, where the voice of the people is the key in everything that we do. Now, this is exactly what is going on. Look in America right now. When you look at the race of mayor in America between Mandani and Como and others leaders, but you see that the Mandani is a socialist democracy, and then you find other people don't. Of course, President Donald Trump called him as a communist. So the question is, where should we go now? Should we accept our leadership within our country, or should we reject them? So that question lies to you guys. But so far, almost everyone in East Africa is learning from this man himself, of course, General Yoweri Museveni, but of course, without forgetting his ally friends from Cameroon and Cote d'Ivoire. Remember, these are people who have been in power for so long, and they have understood how to play this game within the communist democracy. So at the end of the day, our people need to think twice that should we accept their leadership styles that has been introduced, which most of the European and other states has never endorsed them. Should we accept them as long as they are giving us the service delivery? Or should we still lean ourselves more on the democratic side of the demand where the people's rights are morally being recognized and the freedoms? But even under the communist democracy, of course, we understand they play between the two, between the democracy and authoritarian. Sometimes they allow the government to take the full authority and power in their hand, but while the other side, they also allow the people's voice can also be listened. But in Uganda, it's somehow working because we see that, we see it happening. There's a lot of freedom we have, we push it out there, the voice we have. So at least it's somehow working, but in other places, it's not working. So the question is, what should we do? Should we accept the new trend of the political atmosphere of under the communist democracy, which is morally being practiced in Africa, or should we reject them? Now the question is, what should we do as the young generation? And that question, I leave it to you guys. I want to hear your reply. I sign out. See you guys next time in the next video.